Let's get a sense then of what the government thinks has happened today. We asked for a cabinet minister to front up and defend their PM. No one has come forth so far, but Nadhim Zahawi is the Children and Families Minister. And thank you, Nadhim. We appreciate you coming on. We'll also talk to Barry Gardiner in a second and to Ian Paisley as well. But let me start with you. That last 24 hours to Strasbourg then, what a total shambles and a humiliation. Nothing, right?
Well, clearly it's not ideal that we lost the vote tonight, but I think the Prime Minister is doing the right thing. She listened to Parliament, she went to Strasbourg, she got legal undertakings, clearly not enough to convince 75 of my colleagues to support the withdrawal agreement. I campaigned for Brexit.
She might as well have done nothing there. I mean, it was never going to work, was it?
That's not true, because you and I both know that when you look at Geoffrey Cox's advice, Paragraph 14 clearly says that the EU cannot trap us in the backstop. That is now, or was a concession.
Over. Well, it's all over, isn't it? That deal is done.
Look, we are where we are, and we need to move forward from here. And the Prime Minister, rightly so, is now putting a motion before Parliament to ask Parliament whether we want to leave on the 29th of March without a deal. We've made those preparations. We've spent £4.2 billion preparing to leave. It's not ideal, but preparing to leave. It's a free vote. I'll be voting for that because it's consistent with our policy.
What will you be voting for? You'll be voting tomorrow.
Yes.
We've got the no deal one, which we know is going to be hardened into something much firmer with the Spellman amendment.
Yes.
You will be voting to take no deal off the table?
No, I will be voting to make sure that we leave the EU on the 29th of March.
You'll keep no deal?
Absolutely right.
You'll keep no deal on the table.
Absolutely.
And will the PM keep no deal on the table?
Well, I think it will be consistent for all of us in government to keep no deal off the table, because if you take no deal off the table, you ensure that we will do a bad deal.
That's utterly mad. She's giving you a free vote. So, yes. In other words, she is predicting that half a cabinet will go one way and half a cabinet will go another. We literally don't know what she will do.
Well, the consistent thing to do is that since we've made the preparations and spent £4.2 billion on those preparations, it's not ideal.
We don't know what the Prime Minister is going to do tomorrow.
You need to keep no deal on the table.
And can you tell me that the whole of the cabinet is going that way?
No, of course I can't. That's why it's a free vote.
Right.
But what I'm saying to you, as a responsible member of Parliament representing Stratford-on-Avon, my constituents, I think the right thing to do for my constituents and the country is to keep no deal on the table, because the only way you secure a good deal is if you can walk away. If you can't walk away,
who is in charge now? Who is in charge of this government? Who's in charge of the country right now?
Well, first of all, the Prime Minister outlined the process well before today. She said, I'll bring back the deal with legal undertakings. If it falls, I will put a vote before Parliament.
Who do you think is in charge, honestly? Do you think Parliament's now taking control? Do you think the Prime Minister's still in control, honestly?
I think if Parliament attempts to take control, that's the worst place to be. There is an amendment tonight that's gone down by very senior colleagues, supported by the DUP, with Nicky Morgan, I know you're going to have it on the show, Damien Green, Steve Baker, the DUP, which actually does call for a very short extension to the 22nd of May, and then deliver what is called the Malthouse Compromise. So
I know, and we'll talk to Nicky. If you'll let me, I'll talk to Nicky Morgan about that. Do you think the Cabinet should decide now it is time for her to go? And I know that tonight is not about leadership, but it is important to understand what the point of her staying on is. Because either you think that the deal is still a running possibility, or else you think it's definitely not a possibility, in which case, what's she doing? That's what she's been doing for the last 2 years. Should the Cabinet tell her to go?
Changing the leader, or changing our manager, or the captain, whatever metaphor you want to use, will not solve the problem.
You don't know that, actually?
No, they won't. It won't solve. It doesn't matter. I'm convinced that whoever would have been in number 10 would have actually had a tough time as the Prime Minister's had.
Sure, but you are convinced that she is still the best person to deliver Brexit?
She is absolutely the best person.
Is that because no one else wants to do it?
No, because it's a tough ask, right? This is a negotiation, and she's been gritty and determined and focused. She's put her own personal interests aside and wants to do this thing for her country.
I'm not being funny, Nadhim, but at what point do you say it's a tough task and she's been gritty, but she has failed twice? That's all she's done for 2 years, and it hasn't worked.
I would argue that Parliament has failed, and I think Parliament needs to come together tomorrow. If we can come together, and I think we can, by the way, on this Malthouse compromise, where if the Conservative Party comes together with the DUP, we can get a majority and we get Parliament to back that and take that back to the EU. They are the kings of the last-minute fudge, and I think there could be a deal there.
The ERG are the kings, or EU?
No, the EU are the kings.
Okay, well, that's
of the last
complicated.
Minute
Barry Gardiner, I think millions of the public tonight will be utterly baffled by what has happened. We have 16 days to go. We have 2 weeks to go. What are they going to make of what's happened in Parliament today? It's just rubbish.
Nadhim may be in denial, but the country's in despair. And I cannot imagine what people who are running their businesses, who are worried about their jobs, are thinking about politicians tonight. Because what Nadhim said about the vote that's going to take place tomorrow is that it is a vote to take no deal off the table. No, it's not. A vote to take no deal off the table would take no deal off the table permanently. This doesn't. It takes no deal off the table only until the end of March, and that shows that he and the Prime Minister still think they can hold a gun to Parliament's head and bring back the same bad deal that Parliament has rejected twice.
The truest words were spoken today by Charles Walker, probably,
yes,
who declared that history would see this as a failing Parliament.
Yes.
You, the Labour Party, are just as much a part of that as the government.
They are peddlers of chaos.
Let him talk.
That is what they are.
No. Sorry, Nadhim, if you want to go again, then please do. But I'll respond to Emily in my own way.
Please do, because I'm looking at your leadership. The country is desperate for leadership. We know
Indeed.
We're not getting it from the government, and we're not getting it from Jeremy Corbyn either.
Oh no, I'm sorry. We have said for over a year now that we should have a new deal that takes her red lines off the table. We said all the way back in last February that her deal would not get through. We've said that it can't get through because of the way in which Parliament and the EU
Barry,
are
you know
committed.
that Corbyn did not even mention a second referendum in his response. At least Theresa may did. Anna Soubry accused him of prattling around.
And
if Anna
Soubry had thought for 1 millisecond that tabling an amendment calling for a second referendum, she would have done it if she thought it could be successful.
Have you got nothing more to offer tonight?
No.
You've got nothing more to offer,
Yes, we have.
you?
Sorry, we've got a lot more to offer, and that's exactly what Jeremy did. What we've set out very clearly is that the Prime Minister must now reach out to the other side of Parliament, to all sides in Parliament, and say, I will change my red lines, I will act in good faith, not bad faith.
She hasn't done it. Why would she do it now? Why is it down to Labour now to say, OK, I admit our deal was pretty much like the PM's and that has been rejected,
it wasn't.
and we have to go further.
Sorry,
we
Emily,
have to stand up like the SNP.
Don't slide those things in.
I'm
because
sorry,
they're
but
not
we're
true.
waiting for something proper from Labour that we can really understand.
Well, you know, the
alternative.
interesting thing is that the European Union, when we put those things forward, they said, this changes the game. This is something that we can work with, and it would change the eventual agreement that we could negotiate.
All right.
So you have to accept that when you say that we've not tabled anything, in fact, the EU thinks that we've tabled something that is really workable and that would change the situation.
Answer
so
me
what
this.
we need to do now is we need to make sure that we get those red lines changed. We need to put forward a deal that honours the referendum result, that accepts that we're leaving the EU, but does it in such a way that protects the jobs of people out there.
OK, if there is a general election called next week, which there is every likelihood could happen, what will be on your manifesto? What Brexit vision will be on your manifesto then?
To negotiate the deal that we have set out.
That's going to be on the leaflet.
We will decide what our manifesto position is, as we normally do. It's a democratic party. It's not made up by one person on Newsnight, as you know. So we will decide that. But what we have set out...
It's not made up at all. I mean, people are literally pulling their hair out tonight.
Sorry, I didn't interrupt you, Nadhim.
I'm going to move on to Ian Paisley, if you don't mind.
It's not peddlers of chaos. It's trying to say that this Prime Minister, the deal that she has has tried to negotiate.
Okay.
She has failed over 2.5 years.
We
have
that.
put forward a reasonable alternative that the EU say is a game changer. This government is now structuring things to refuse to allow Parliament to do it, and that is why next week Parliament must take back control.
I'm going to move on to Ian Paisley. You'll support presumably no deal tomorrow. You would like to see no deal left on the table, would you?
Of course we would, and anyone who's embarked in any sort of negotiation to get any sort of result will always have that last option available to them. To remove it weakens your negotiating team, weakens the options that you have. And I say this to all members of Parliament: if you vote to remove this from the Prime Minister's arsenal, essentially she will have to blink again.
You have been propping up the government now for 2 years that you voted against twice. What's the point?
Emily, the only way you can get a deal is if we put Europe in a position where they will blink.
Okay.
And at the moment, the British government has not been able to do that.
You've heard what Europe has said, and they've said it a billion times. You've been propping up a government that you voted against twice on the only thing that the government has actually brought forward. What's the point?
Well, we want to get a good deal that will actually work. Everyone's agreed around this table.
Well, don't vote against it.
Everyone's agreed around this table that the deal that the Prime Minister's brought forward is not a good deal. It can be better. It can be made better.
So
indeed,
you have confidence in the Prime Minister, do you, tonight? Can you say the DUP remains confident in the Prime Minister, Theresa May?
Yes, and we're keeping the Conservative government in power for that reason. Because the alternatives are far worse. But we're saying to the Prime Minister, you have a duty. You have a responsibility to actually negotiate a deal. How many
times is she going to carry on losing before you say, maybe this wasn't such a good idea?
No, look, if you want, we can look at every single permeation. We can look at a general election opportunity. None of this does away with Brexit. 17.5 million people voted for Brexit. Well, we intend to deliver Brexit. That Parliament will fail if it does not deliver Brexit.
Despite Northern Ireland being solid backers of Remain, who do you represent now?
They're not solid backers.
67% of voters there say the DUP are doing a bad job of representing Northern Ireland.
I don't care about silly polls. I care about real polls.
You don't care about the people in Northern Ireland?
No, don't be silly. I care about real polls. The real polls. Almost 70% of my constituents voted to leave the EU. One of the largest single vote areas in the United Kingdom. Now, you know the sectarian headcount in Northern Ireland as well as I do, Emily, and people voted nationalist and unionist in that referendum in 2016. Right. That's the bottom line.
Gentlemen, thank you all very much.
Thank you.